got to look at teachers and teaching in a completely different way, and I absolutely believe that AI is the solution to this. I shared the pain of frustration. In fact, my eldest went to his state school when it was in special measures. And if you think about it, all of them are damaged in some way. You've got to completely alter the concept of what is a teacher. Nobody is talking about this, and it's just a ticking time bomb waiting to happen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Three Bosses in a Podcast in our series, Entrepreneurship in Education. And I'm super delighted to invite and warmly welcome a friend, a mentor, a colleague, a boss, Alex Russell. In a nutshell, describe who you are, Alex.
I am incredibly lucky. I fell on my feet when things weren't going so well for me, and I found a career in teaching that I have just loved every minute of. So who am I? I'm a dad. I have 4 boys. I've been married for 40 years, and I've worked in education for the last 35, and there has not been a day gone by where I've not thought how lucky I am to work in education. That's who I am.
That's who you are. But what we're missing there is quite a lot of colour. And so you're also the holder of an OBE. You also run a charity. Talk to us a little bit about how all of these just accolades just keep falling from the sky.
Well, I find it all a bit embarrassing, if I'm honest. I had no idea. I actually thought my notification of my award was a fishing exercise, because we'd all been told that we were going to have red team review of our ICT, and that we should expect phishing attacks to see whether we would react to them. So this thing came through, and I just deleted it. I congratulated myself. And I then got a second email about a week later to say, you haven't replied. And I looked at this, and I then opened it, and it was the recognition of my work in education. And I then didn't tell anybody for some days.
Even your wife?
No, I didn't say a word. I was just so embarrassed about it. And then I said to her, listen, I've had this. I really think I should turn this down. This is just embarrassing. And she said, well, you're an idiot. And, the usual loving comments that you get from your partner. And I accepted it. And I was actually amazed by how pleased people were for me, but the organization, because as you know, Matt, all of these things are a team effort.
Yeah.
They are all a team effort. And I have a great debt of gratitude to many people. But I think they were really pleased and they were really proud. And so, yeah, I accepted it. And, the rest, as they say, is history.
What is it that you get? You've got a piece of paper, what is it, a medal? What do you get?
If you're a bit cynical about these sorts of things, which I was, I'm a total denier now, because when I went to Windsor Castle, it was the most amazing day. You're made to feel incredibly special. And I had Prince, now King Charles, give me my award. And honestly, I genuinely believed he knew me. I mean, clearly he has no idea who I am. But for that 30 seconds I was with him, it was just, he knew about the work I was doing, the schools I'd run, and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, he was very well briefed, but you do feel amazing. Yeah,
That's amazing. So this is, of course, on the backdrop of. I'm going to give it a little bit of context here. So we're gonna rewind the clock back to 2009.
Yeah.
And I had just left a career in marine biology, and I came back to the UK. And I was given my first teaching placement at my PGCE in a school that was in special measures. Now, even at the time, it is not a PGCE student on a placement is not allowed to do their placement in a school that's in special measures. However, I clearly fell through the cracks, and I arrived on my first day. And within a week, I fell in love with the school, and it's Epsom Manure High School, which is now, I suppose, was the lead school of the academisation that is now the Bourne Education Trust. And you gave me, Alex, my first teaching job after my teaching placement there, didn't you?
I did. So just to roll back, 2009, the school had gone into special measures in 2008. And believe it or not, when it was announced that I was going to be taking over the school, the Ofsted inspector who'd put the school into special measures called me and said, "Are you serious about taking on this school?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I honestly think it was the closest thing I've ever seen to a war zone in education."
No way. Wow.
She told me that on the first day of the inspection, the first morning, they thought about closing the school down. Behaviour was so bad.
Whoa. Is this a secondary, by the way?
Secondary, yeah. Yeah, 11 to 18. And I arrived, and it was my second headship. So I'd already taken one school out of special measures in 2004 to 2008, 2009. And like you, Matt, I just thought these kids are hilarious. You've always got to find humour in education. You have to find humour. And they deserve a much better deal than they had had. And there were 3 other secondary schools in the local area, all of whom were rather good. And we had 65 children for 280 places in year 7. And the quality of the estate was just shocking. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. In fact, on my tour around, I went into the PE changing rooms, and there was, the water jump in a 3,000-meter steeplechase. That was the urinal. It was like a huge trough, and it was full of urine.
Oh my God.
And I said to the premises manager that I've never seen anything like that before. And he went, "Well, the kids here don't deserve anything better, do they?"
Oh my.
And that was very much the attitude of many colleagues in this school. And if you remember, Matt, you were there as a PGC student, and I began by changing the staff expectations and also changing lots of the staff. And there were about 30 Australians. I mean, there were just Australians everywhere. And they were all on supply. I paid them all their travel. I would allow them to go off traveling if they needed to. But we needed to have young people with loads of energy, loads of optimism, who didn't have the baggage of, kids like this can't.
Yeah.
And you just needed people who just believed in these children.
You've missed a quality as well there. Unbelievable amounts of naivety as well is what you were banking on.
Yeah. I mean,
no previous experience. Is that what you're saying there, Matthew? Like, yeah.
But if you give young people an opportunity, and you support them, and you trust them, and you embrace them, and you say, you're amazing, and you're half decent to them. So I think there's a stereotype, isn't there, in education, where the head is this slightly remote figure, and actually you got to be out of your office. I had a ridiculous rule. You probably don't remember this, but I had a ridiculous rule that if I ever saw anybody in leadership in their office during the day, I would kick them out of their office and make them walk the school and interact with staff and children. And if young teachers, if they make mistakes and you laugh it off and you put your arm around them and say, "Don't worry, it'll get better." I mean, there were tears, weren't there? But not from us, from you and me, Matt. But it was tough, and it was blooming hard work. But actually, we turned it around really quickly. In 7 months, we went from special measures to good in Ofsted.
There's something around this which fascinates me when we run businesses where we essentially have two main stakeholders if we look at it. We've got the children and young people we support, but we also have to make sure the parents are happy, or the caregivers, whoever's like, in that situation. We have to make sure we deal with both. And I feel like with if you come out of the industry of working with, like with intuition, you come to a different industry, often there's only one stakeholder, and that's even quite hard to do and to make them happy. It's the same in your school. You've got two stakeholders that you've got to keep really happy.
No, you got three. You got three actually.
Yeah, go on.
Well, you've got parents, you've got staff, and you've got pupils.
But like, and is there one more important than the other? Because like with your staff, like as you said, you've come into this difficult school, or it's perceived as difficult, but it sounds like leadership wasn't leading, and then you have to come in and go, right, this is a big problem over here, like whether it's staff or you're giving it a clean sweep. You dealt with that one thing first in the knowledge or expertise that you currently have to say, if I get that bit right, these other things will improve. Is that like the kind of way that you went about it?
I think you've got to have clarity. You've got to know exactly. You've got to ooze confidence, even if you're not feeling very confident. By the way, you've got to suggest certainty, and you've got to develop relationships with all of those stakeholders really, really quickly. And if you think about it, all of them are damaged in some way when a school's gone into special measures, because that's systemic failure, isn't it? So parents feel unbelievably let down, and then they are just worried about their child's education, because often we don't empathise with the anxiety that goes on at home around education. Because we, as educators, we're in it, we see it from our point of view, we're the staff, we're the expert. But actually, my children all went to state school. I shared the pain of frustration. In fact, my eldest went to his state school when it was in special measures. So I knew the sort of anxiety that we felt as parents. Had we made the right decision? Were we going to get a good deal for our child? Were we going to irrevocably damage him? But often, you're dealing with people who don't have a choice. They have no choice. They can't move house. That is their school. So the anger that is often expressed by parents is actually worry, and also a lack of information. I'm always surprised in schools where the barriers go up. Like, you close the gates, parents go away, we're the experts, sit down, shut up, and let us do our stuff. And the first thing I did was open the school to parents. Say, you can come in anytime, you can walk to school, don't care. So that's the first thing. The children feel unbelievably betrayed, because they know who the best teachers are, and they know who the people who are just pulling the wool over your eyes, who are lazy, who aren't preparing, who don't care. They know. You just ask them and you say, when you look at your timetable, what excites you about your timetable? And they go, oh God, And one of the things that convinced me about Matt was kids would say to me, oh, he's amazing. He's fun. He's strict, but he's fun. And we're learning. Okay. And then, of course, the last lot are the staff, and they feel unsupported by leaders. They feel sometimes frightened of the children, and they're very nervous. And they feel that they're working incredibly hard, which often they are, and they're not getting any return from the children because the respect between the two parties have broken down. So you've got those three stakeholders, and everybody's looking at you as the head to sort it all out. And I've always gone big on simplicity, clarity, and relationships. Those are the three things for me. Keep it simple. Children have to go to lessons. Lessons have to be enjoyable. Otherwise, they won't go to lessons. If somebody misbehaves, they know what the consequences are. Always communicate with parents and so on. And I think if school leaders make leadership complicated, it seems to me. I think running a school is really straightforward, but if you talk to lots of heads, they'll go, blimey, it's relentless, it's really complicated. No, it's not. It's really simple. High quality teaching, Great, great opportunity for young people, and it's a place where people want to come to. It's really easy, and if you unpick that, you will actually run a pretty successful organisation. We've I've used that blue. We've taken 12 schools out of special measures in 11 years. You know, when I think about the impact that's had on those communities, people don't always like me when I go in. Parents go, "Oh, who's this bloke? Oh, you've come from Surrey. Oh, you're posh git," and all of that sort of stuff. Um, um, Somebody obviously once told them that actually my family roots were from Edinburgh, and one parent said to me, "Listen to my accent." And he walked into the school and he went, "You think you're a hard Scottish bastard?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, that's me, with my posh accent." But you often get a lot of reaction from parents, which is quite hostile. Um, and I think you just have to know that what you're doing is right, because by the end they're going, "Oh, thank you so much."
It's that changing of attitudes, isn't it? And bringing people on board. When does that become? Does it become more challenging, like the bigger the school, or is it the bigger the problem that you walk into? Because there's communicating with, just for example, where I live in Canterbury, we've got two quite big schools, but there's nearly 2,000 children in there. Is that the same as communicating with those, the same as, say, having one of the smaller high schools, which has about 500?
I think size does matter, actually, and clearly it's much easier. Oops. Clearly it's much easier if you've got fewer people to sort of get round and talk to and develop those relationships with. But Bourne Education Trust is now 22,000 pupils, 3,000 members of staff, um, and 36 schools.
Wow.
So I still have those principles. I really think about those relationships. I think about the clarity, the simplicity. What are we trying to do? And as I say, if you don't veer too far from those things, I don't think you'll go far wrong.
So simplicity is the key, isn't it? Like, to all of those things.
Yeah, but you think about your own businesses. Simplicity. You keep it simple. What are you trying to do? What problem are you trying to solve? And you won't go far wrong.
One of the things that you taught us as a staff when we were working at Epsom and Your High, and you had a buzzword, and I still use it today, and I use it with my team, and it's you need to be relentless. Relentless drive on standards, on quality, on commitment, and all the rest of it. And my team are exhausted with me all the time because I will not give it. I'm a dog with a bone. I will not give up. I will not give over. And I remember that you were a massive driver. One of the things that was all about the standards and the quality was staff presentation. You were so militant about how we were presented, how well dressed we were, etc. And then in turn, you were militant about how we picked up the students' dress code and top buttons and done up and ties done up properly and shirts tucked in. And it was one of your biggest, not one of your biggest, there was loads of other stuff that was going on, but I remember that being so important. How do you keep the relentlessness going when it's so big? Tutoring companies are not 22,000 students strong with 3,000 staff, right? They're a lot smaller organizations. So how do you keep that level of relentlessness going?
I have a mantra: never let anything go. No matter how small, never let it go. So I listen to people all the time who go, "Oh, so and so was late for a meeting, and it's really frustrating. I think it's a bit rude." And I say, Have you spoken to them? You don't, you know, you don't have to be unpleasant, but have you spoken to them? Oh no, I just haven't had time. Speak to them. Pick it up straight away, no matter how small. And I do have, and it really freaks people out, I have a really uncanny eye for detail. Ridiculous. I mean, ridiculous. So if somebody's got a tie on that I haven't seen before, I'll say, "Oh, Matthew, is that a new tie?" And they go, "How did you know that?" I mean, it's so bad that I can tell when people have had their suits dry cleaned. It's ridiculous. Okay, so I've got an eye for detail. So, but I will not let anything go. So if I visit a school, so I was in a school on the south coast on Monday, went round with the head, and he said, well, "What did you think?" And it's a school we've just taken on in special measures. It's coming great guns, and I said I thought quality of learning was impressive, much better. The behaviour is really good. I said, "What am I gonna what am I gonna tell you? What have I picked up on the walk round?" And his face dropped, and he said, "You saw some torn displays," and I went, "I did, and your office is untidy." And actually, yours is not the only office that's untidy. And I went round in my head all the offices that I'd seen. I said, "Next time I come here, they've got to be tidy." And he was like, "But Alec," and I went, "No. You get the small details right, because that tells you you've got high standards, that your presentation is important." Because I always go back to, we are expecting children to wear uniform and to wear it smartly. So therefore, teachers have to be smart. You can't have your cake and eat it. You either have no uniform and then teachers can dress down, or you have a uniform. But it's that small, it's always picking things up and doing it in a pleasant way. So I always say to every school I've ever walked into, I say, "I will never be unpleasant to you, but I will tell you the truth." And actually, too many leaders are utterly dishonest. They bitch and moan behind people's backs, but don't have the front to have it out with them in person.
I agree. I agree with this, and because and I've worked in schools that on their own, just federations and schools that are not involved in MATs. I've also been involved in 2 MATs locally to where I live, and I would say in the school that was on its own, there was a strong. They're strong. They're strong leaders, and there are always bits that you can improve on. But the one thing which I think caused the most amount of pain to people was when one person would do something wrong and you get a blanket email.
Yeah.
Because there's not that, well, I need to go and open the door to this person and just sit down with them and just be really clear with that honesty. But there wasn't perhaps that confidence to go and have that difficult conversation, which I've actually then picked up, and not something I talk about a lot, but I absolutely have fear around that, or that anxiety around having difficult conversations. The stuff that you're talking about there, those small things, I don't know whether I could open up the door and say to someone, "Do you know what, your office is a mess." Even in a jokey way. So where do you think, I don't even know if this is a skill or just something you just have to do and get used to over time. Were you always like that? Because I would imagine you've always had the eye for detail, but were you always really open and honest, or was it something that you learned along the way?
I've got nicer at being honest. I've always been fairly straightforward, shall we say,
Okay.
and it's got me into trouble in the past where I've done it in a possibly clumsy way, or I've not thought through. But actually, most people, and when I say most, I would say 99 out of 100, when you sit down and say, "Come on, that wasn't good enough, or that's not right, that so I have with my core team, we start at 9:30, and the first time that we met as a team, so this is the trust team, at 9:29, people were saying, "I'm just going to get a cup of coffee," and I didn't say a word. I just started the meeting, and so at the end of the meeting, I just said, "Right, too many of us. We're not ready to start at 9:30. We're on a tight timetable. I'm not being unreasonable. If you want a coffee, you get here at 25 past. We start at 9:30." So you're not screaming and shouting at people, but lots of people would just let that go and then moan to their partner when they get home, "Oh, my bloody meeting, Matt Curnier was 5 minutes late again." Well,
Yeah.
have you spoken to Matt? So I find it unbelievably frustrating when I talk to colleagues about their working experience and they express frustration about small details that could just easily be cut off at the pass.
I agree. I wonder what that is. I mean, I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about the the qualifications that lead us into leadership in education, because I'm not sure that they're fit for purpose. I mean, I did the ML, and then it was offered to do the senior one, and I was like, I'm not sure I got anything from the ML that was really helpful, like other than what I really wanted was to be able to spend the day with the head. What I really wanted to do is go and live a life and then ask questions exactly about how you lead. Like running a school project, I was good at that, and I could evidence all of that. Wasn't the skill that I was missing. What I wanted to see was, because we had we were really lucky. I've been really fortunate, I think, over my course of work in education. I've had a few really strong leaders. I wanted to know the secret. And I did have a conversation with him before he left, my first head teacher, about how have you managed to keep like this sense of belonging in a school when what I was seeing outside of our school, not in every school back then, so going back a little while, other schools seemed to be just crashing and burning, but yet we were really strong. We had really experienced staff. We all liked to spend time with one another. It wasn't all in our classrooms all the time. We had a really nice balance. So what's the secret? Why are we just mildly more happy than everybody else that are my friends in teaching? And you've mentioned it already, like right at the beginning about this. Let's just start telling people and believing that people are good and they're great and they can do their jobs. And that's what he said. And I was like a little bit like, is that it? He was like, well, look, you have to pick people up on things, but ultimately people are good and they are great. They just sometimes need to be told it a few times for them to kind of like get that feeling, and then they're good again.
One of the things that Matt asked me to do was just sort of think about my younger self and all of that. And I remember I was a rather arrogant 18-year-old. And my father was a diplomat. And he was out in post. And I went out to visit him. And I made a quip about his chauffeur, because he was a senior diplomat and he had a chauffeur. And he pinned me up against a wall. Now, my father was 5'6", he was tiny. And he pinned me up against a wall and he said, don't you ever disrespect anybody regardless of what they do. Everybody deserves to be respected and everybody contributes to the greater good. Mm. And my father was not a violent man at all. He really wasn't, but he was so outraged by my dismissiveness and my arrogance as an 18-year-old. And I remember sort of hating myself afterwards. And that has always stayed with me, that no matter who is in front of me, I know it's my job to get the best out of them and find out what makes them tick. So I knew every cleaner's name in the school. I knew their families. I would ask after their daughter or whatever it may be. I made sure I knew absolutely everybody. I used to spend the summer with folders. It's just as well I was never sort of arrested in this day and age, because I would have pictures of children, the mug shots, in a folder in my car. But I would learn every child's name so that when I met them on the gate in the morning, I could say, morning, Matthew, morning, Rich. They go, bloody hell, he knows my name. And I think if you genuinely like people, and I am surprised by how many heads appear, A, not to like children very much, and B, not to like people very much. I mean, not everyone, of course, loads of us do, but there are some who appear not to. Mm. I think that, there are people who have been doing the same job forever. My PA was a woman called Debbie Nixon. And I said to Debbie one day, what do you want to do with your career? And she said, I said, do you want to be a PA? Or, is that what you want to do? And she said, actually, my ambition is to get into marketing. So I said to her, have you got a degree? Have you got a qualification? She went, no. And I said, right, we'll pay for you to do a marketing qualification. And you don't have to be my PA. I don't really need a PA. I think, we don't have PAs anymore. Um, and she is now Bourne Education Trust head of marketing. She's absolutely amazing.
Oh, wow.
But if it hadn't been for that chance conversation, I had another one. We had a young colleague who'd left school at 16, no qualifications, and she was doing events or something. And I said to her, I was working late one night and she was still there. And I said, you've got to go, you've got to go. And I said, do you like events? And she said, it's all right. I said, well, what do you really want to do? She said, I want to do HR. So she's now doing an apprenticeship and she's in our people team. So it's always about giving people opportunities, no matter what their role is. So I said to Matt, you could go all the way in education, and he could have, by the way. I've always said that to you, Matt. But right from the early age, I said to him, "Look, there's a carrot for you. You're and you were what, head of year within about 30 seconds, weren't you?"
Yeah, 38 seconds.
Yeah, but you qualified, and I'm pretty certain you were in a substantive post about 18 months later.
8 months later, because I started in the September, and then by the February I was head of year.
Yeah, so it's about believing in people. Do you remember Jade Grills?
Yes.
So she was an art teacher, never spoke, never was quiet, got on with her job, was really diligent. And I walked up to her and said, Jade, I want you to be head of year. And she looked at me and just went, me? You want me to be head of year? I went, yeah, I do. I think you'll be amazing. And she was amazing. But nobody had really, she was slightly grey in that people just, because she was so good, so quiet, just did her job. And I think, you talk about what makes people happy in organisations. It's if they feel noticed and that people will do something. And I think I've worked really hard, and I make sure my teams work really hard on recognizing the talent that's in front of them. And it does definitely go back to that moment when I was 18. I thought, right, nobody's ever going to say that I disrespect people ever again.
Were you always a natural leader, Alex? Like, so even go back to childhood. Were you into sport or anything like that?
I was a terrible rugby player, although I fantasized about playing for Scotland. My dad once watched me playing rugby, and I was playing fly half, and the opposing fly half got the ball, and he was obviously expecting this crunching tackle, and I just headed off diametrically in the opposite direction. And at the end of the game, he said to me, he said, Alex, what were you doing? And I looked at him with a completely straight face and went, oh, I was covering back in case he broke through. I was avoiding the tackle, basically.
Absolutely.
So the answer is, I did play cricket to a reasonable high level, but actually I wasn't that confident at school.
Okay.
School wasn't the easiest place for me. Largely because I behaved so badly, which is so ironic, given that I'm now so fastidious about. And before I came into teaching, I worked for Price Waterhouse for 6 years, somewhat unsuccessfully. And there were all these people who I thought were amazing accountants, and I just thought, this isn't for me. So I found that period of my life up until about my late 20s, where I was quite reluctant to push myself forward. But when I went into education, so my first job was in a failing school in southeast London, on a massive housing estate. And I'm this posh middle class guy, not my hard Scottish roots, but a posh middle class guy. And I walked into this classroom, the A star to C, not 5 A star to C, any A star to C, 4% in this school. And I was a history teacher, and the history results were 0.8%. And I walked into this classroom, and these kids, I had nothing in common with these kids. I stayed there for 4 years. I loved it. And I realized I could do it. Matt walked into a classroom, he could do it. There were other people Nick, do you remember Nick Benjamin? He walked into I mean, they just rioted. You know, some people can do it, some people can't. And I realised, A, I really liked it, and B, that I could do it.
Mm.
And I've been lucky. I mean, luck plays a big part, doesn't it, in all of these things? But local management of schools came in 1991, and somebody from an accountancy background um, was suddenly like gold dust because people needed to know how to run budgets and organise their financial affairs. And so I remember this head said to me, "You were an accountant, weren't you? Can you help me with this?" And suddenly I got into governance and all of that sort of jazz. So the answer is no, but I grew in confidence when I felt confident about what I was doing as a person, because accountancy I wasn't confident and therefore didn't push myself forward. But with education, I did feel confident.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten anything catastrophically wrong?
2 appointments.
Don't say me.
Not you. No, I'm very slapdash in my appointments. So in education, you know, there's a very sort of ritualistic way of appointing people. You know, you go to the school, you teach a lesson, you talk about your lesson, you do a presentation, there's an interview, and every man and his dog is on the interview panel, and all of this. And I tend to just talk to people. If I like them, I think they've got a bit about them, I just appoint them. And it's worked in all but 2 occasions, and the 2 occasions it didn't work were utterly catastrophic.
No.
One was to quite a senior position, and everybody told me that I shouldn't appoint this person. But I really liked her, and I thought she had something different to offer. She was slightly alternative, and she made me she made me laugh. I found her quite amusing, and oh, everybody hated her, and I suddenly had people saying I'm going to leave, and it was just awful. It was terrible. And then I followed up her appointment with her successor who was even worse. And I then began to worry that my slapdash way of recruitment was perhaps not the way forward. But I've recovered, and I've made some good appointments since.
I've heard, Matthew, you talk about this a few times, and it's something I'm going through this now, where we're recruiting for the first time, and it's something that's ringing through my ears, where I always that even potentially happened today, where only one person could interview. And we really want to avoid that, because of what Matthew said a few months ago to us, was like, basically, like, you have to have a second set of eyes somewhere, just for a bit of a sense check. Because I'm a bit like, I really like them, that was really good. And then someone will be like, yeah, but did you notice this or see this? Or just to have a little bit of a question mark along the way, just to make you stop and consider. Because I do feel like I'm like, oh, that was an amazing lesson, or they did that interview really well. And I'm just always trying to see the best without ever questioning it. Do you see what I mean? So how because there is the longer question here is, how do you recruit in that way where it is protected? Because there's a word that they keep coming back to, I wrote down almost instantly, was like, there's longevity in education, the longevity of not just staying within the classroom, but then, you know, progressing up. Like, where does that come from? Is that because you do have just really good instincts, or is there another secret behind it all?
Well, I think for me, it's about the person. So I always found it unbelievably frustrating when you would say to somebody, "Oh, Matt, could you listen? I'm really struggling for a business studies teacher. Can you just give business studies a go? I'm 10 periods short." And if Matt goes, "Actually, I'm a scientist, and I'm afraid I can't do that," I think, If, on the other hand, Matt goes, "Bring it on, I'll give it a go, it'll be a right laugh," I think he's my sort of guy. Because I've taught all sorts of subjects in my time, and it's always because somebody said to me, would you do that? And I go, "Yeah, all right, I'll do that." And so I think there is an element of risk, but if you behave like that towards people and you ask those sorts of questions, and for me, it's about their flexibility, their adaptability, their agility. much more than their subject knowledge, because I think you've got to have your wits about you to teach up to A level. But actually, GCSE is pretty straightforward. I mean, the only subject that I would absolutely, there's two actually: music and modern languages would be my two nemesis. In fact, I've got quite an amusing story. So I'm the head teacher at Epsom and Ewell, and this music teacher comes to me and says, "Alex, could you take my music lessons for me? I need to go and see my father. He's unwell." I went, "Yeah, of course. Go, 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 go." So I said, she said, "I've set it all up. It's on the Apple Macs." I went, "Yeah, okay, fine." So I walked in, and it's year 7, and I go to the Apple Mac, and I think, how on earth do you log on to this thing? I've never been on an Apple Mac. So I'm fiddling around. And do you remember Karen Barham? Karen Davis, as was, right?
Yeah.
And Karen is walking past. I go, Karen, come in here. And I said, "Do you know how to use these Apple Macs?" She went, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." So she logs me in, and the music lesson comes up, and I look at what I'm supposed to do, and I think, anyway, 20 minutes has gone, and these lovely year sevens, I'm the head teacher, and they're like, and this little girl puts her hand up, and she goes, "Sir, are you actually a qualified teacher?" And I was like, but I think if you have people who are sort of get up and go, those are the sorts of people. And if you remember all those Aussies that we had in the dark days, they were amazing. It would be, "Can you do that? No worries, mate." It was always, "No worries, mate. I'll do that." And that attitude is very different to lots of Brits. Excuse me, I'm a French teacher, and that's what I'm prepared to teach. So, yes, you might get it wrong technically, but I don't think I get it too wrong in terms of the personality. And for me, people say now there's a bet person, a Bourne Education, there's a bet person. And people say to me, "Oh, Alex, you'll like this person. They're your sort of person." And actually, if you go around to all our schools, they all feel the same. They don't look the same, they don't behave the same, but they feel the same because there's that get up and go flexibility. We've got to get this right for the children.
Do you think that? I think the answer is probably going to be yes. But do you think that in any business, because a school, particularly the size that the bet has become, etc., there is a business element to it, right? So do you think that people make or break businesses? And so for our listeners who are starting up their own tutoring journey or starting up their own tutoring companies or whatever, what would you say to them about the tutors they choose, the admin staff or the client manager that they choose, or what would you say to them?
They've got to reflect the culture and ethos of the person who is running the organisation. If they don't, I believe that every community deserves a fantastic school, regardless of whether it's culturally diverse, traveller community. I don't care. Everybody deserves a great school. If I hear people saying, bloody kids like this lot, they just don't deserve it. I mean, that is like red rag to a bull to me. So they've got to reflect your values and your culture and your ethos. And if they don't, they're not for you. Doesn't matter if they're the best tutor in the world. If they don't back up what you believe, don't employ them.
There's there's a bigger question here that kind of might sit within like what you want to talk about within your role as a CEO of a MAP, but I think on a wider scale in the UK, there's this huge retention issue.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there is a simplistic answer to this, but how are you solving that within your own community? What do you see as the bigger solution over the next 5 to 10 years for the UK with their education and the teaching retention crisis?
I think we've got to think completely differently about what being a teacher could be. So we're very traditional, aren't we, in education? You expect every teacher's a tutor, so they have to be in at 9 o'clock, and they have to take, or 8:30. They have to take the register, then they have to do this, da 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 da. Um, I would say, and this may hurt you to the core, Matt, as a previous head of year, but most people would have put being a tutor second or third or fourth on their list of priorities for their role in the school. I think you'd probably agree with that. And I think that we've got to look at teachers and teaching in a completely different way. And I absolutely believe that AI is the solution to this. I think there needs to be much greater flexibility around the use of technology, much greater access to technology, and I think that teachers need to. I think the secondary model to 16 has to replicate the primary model. So if you go to a primary school teachers teach everything. They don't even blink. Yet in secondary, and we all agree that GCSE is really not that difficult. We have this sort of rather sort of principled stand of I'm a teacher of X, Y, or Z, and I'll not do anything else. And I think we've got to see teachers as coaches, as mentors, as facilitators. We've got to use artificial intelligence and devices to make sure that personalised learning is genuinely personalised, not the old. Do you remember the three-part differentiation that we used to do, top, middle, and bottom? I mean, ridiculous. And we are beginning to see some real green shoots of what personalisation can do for progress of children, a sense of belonging for children, and a sense of pride in coming to school. I'll tell you something that will make you cry if you're the crying type. We did an experiment with a pilot with year 9, and we trained all the TAs to be able to interpret the lesson instantaneously using artificial intelligence for the particular learning need of the child. And there were 5 children in this year 9 group. And you know what main scale teachers are like. You're meant to give the learning support assistant the lesson the week before so that they can interpret it and all this. And all you do is you run and you go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Just stick with me and see what you can do, kind of vibe, yeah? And so these TAs now say, all our lessons now are held in the cloud. So you just draw down the lesson, boom. She would say, right, Matthew, you've got a reading age of 11 and, you have a particular difficulty around, writing, extended writing. Reinterpret the lesson, bang, done. This girl, at the end of a 10-week pilot, she said, I have never in my education career until the last few weeks understood what's gone on in my classrooms, ever. She was in year 9.
Wow.
Can you imagine going through life? She was beautifully behaved, but she just didn't engage, couldn't. She said, I now want to come to school. I now feel that I'm genuinely learning. And I'm quite excited to go to Mr. So-and-so's lesson. It was a maths lesson. Unbelievable, isn't it? That's what personalisation can do. So I think we've got to try and replicate in education the flexibility that is evident in other sectors. Because if you're a learning support assistant and you have to be in school 8 till 3:30 or 8:30 to 3:30, and you get paid £15 an hour, you can actually get more stacking shelves or flexibility, working from home, whatever. We can't do that. So we need to replicate that flexibility without diluting the quality of learning. And I think technology is the way forward.
So are you advocating with that AI, online learning? How does all that in a utopian world, or in a really not even a utopian world, but in a future educational landscape, what does that even look like?
Okay, so nobody is talking about this, and it's just a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. So we are faced with falling roles of children. So we're seeing that in primary. And what are we doing? We are refusing to close schools. I know London is closing some schools, but you try closing a school. It is really difficult because, oh no, Alex, parents like their local school, so we can't do that. Yes, but there's only 6 children in reception. It's not viable. Oh, well, okay. So we've got falling role, which is going to seep through into secondary from about 2032 onwards, okay? 2031, 32. Falling roles, with falling roles, you're going to get collapsing budgets because it's all driven by pupil numbers, okay? We've got an estate generally across the sector that needs huge investment. And we've got a recruitment and retention problem in education. So all of that is a complete systemic disaster for the traditional way of running schools. Now, if you think about it, if you take Epsom and Newell, good example, they have got 98 kids in the sixth form. You cannot make a viable offer across 98 children. So you're restricting the offer for young people, and you are going to have to then make redundant teachers who teach lessons that nobody wants to do. Modern languages is a really good example. Okay, we have like 2 kids wanting to do A-level French and that sort of vibe. So the only way around this is, well, there's 3 things. One, you've got to completely alter the concept of what is a teacher, particularly at secondary. Secondly, you have to digitalize and embrace ed tech on a scale that we're just not seeing. So in my trust, we've got money, so we can do it. But if you're in a 1-form entry primary school in a rural area that's half full, no chance. Okay. And the third thing is there's got to be collaboration between whatever organizations exist. So it could be your organization or your types of organizations, and we've used your organization very successfully, between, particularly at post 16, to offer hybrid learning that is really high quality. So at Epsom and Newell, you can offer 10 subjects, but actually you want to be able to offer 17 subjects. So how can you do that economically? And if you start thinking about that, so we're doing a big pilot with, we've got 5 sixth forms. One is big and the rest are small. And the big has breadth of offer. The smalls don't have breadth of offer. And then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then people say, I'll go to Isha College or I'll go to Woking College or whatever it may be. So we need to say, whichever sixth form you go to, you can have access to 17 courses. What those courses look like are slightly different. Do you know what the biggest problem is? Is that the awarding bodies and the funding agency, unless there is a limited amount of time that you can be online to being physical. But it's madness. If you think about the logic of that, that's saying that any online learning is less value than in person. I don't believe that for a minute. And secondly, that they are just blinkered about the economic realities of running the breadth of offer. So I think there's going to have to be a massive consolidation of the offer, particularly at post 16, so that you can have, in one organization, you can have technical levels, vocational levels, A levels. At the moment, we offer vocational in one, we've got a one T level in another. It's ridiculous. So I think there's got to be a fundamental shift. Do I believe it can happen? I'm nervous.
Yeah, I have these conversations with people a lot, like the teachers who have come out and when they've got that headspace to reflect back on the things that are missing or what they'd like to do, they often talk about we need to shake things up a little bit. We need to come at this with a different perspective. And I've been shouted down before around I feel like we should be looking at what other industries do and what they need. First of all, I feel like there's a gap between what teenagers, young adults leave A levels with, and even universities as well, and that what actually industry is looking for. So I think that's maybe slightly different. I think what we're looking at here and what we're talking about is how do we give really good access to what is actually needed and what's out there in a way where we don't restrict or have restrictions in what we can offer, like having rules in place that don't make sense, having red tape where we don't need to have red tape. Like, why do the exam bodies have that particular thing written down in paper to say, well, no, online learning isn't as strong as face to face, when the reality is not true. That's just not true.
Well, we are pushing a boulder uphill because the starting point is the fundamentals. So if I said to you, I'm going to abolish homework, if I said that to all my schools, we're going to abolish homework, complete waste of time, there would be outrage, right? 97% of children in the latest national survey use AI to do their homework. And what do we do as teachers? We still set it in the same old way, do exercise 5, blah, blah, blah.
And have to mark it.
Yeah.
Still, like the time and effort that goes into both sides, up front and afterwards. Yeah.
So the chair of JCQ said in a speech that he could not envisage a time. This is not like in the next 2 years. He said, we cannot, at JCQ, we cannot envisage a time when children will not be sitting in exam halls, sitting exams for 3 hours or 2 hours. And I put my hand up and said, I think you are in total denial as to what is happening in the working world, universities, and in lots of enlightened schools. And he just said, well, we'll have to disagree. I mean, if that is the chair of JCQ, I mean, what hope do we have?
Yeah, I think I always worry when we have people in authority who aren't even open to the discussion. I think that's worrying. People can have a stance and an opinion, but then to not go, well, we know this is imminent, but we're not even sure what to do about it yet. And so what we're doing is we're sitting and waiting. That is a better response than just denying that it's even happening.
It's because it requires a lot of courage to go, we know that we're hurtling towards the cliff's edge, but we don't know what's after the cliff's edge. So if we ever sort of put a world out there to go, okay, well, what's going to replace? We know that at one point, with the digitization of the world, with the remote virtual working of the world, how do we assess competency? How do we assess education? How do we do all of that in a postmodern world?
Well, the curriculum review's just come out, right?
Yeah.
We put in hours, and I had discussions with DFE on countless occasions about the opportunity for really revamping the curriculum. And I remember the schools minister said to me, okay, well, if you were doing the curriculum review, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd probably have a bit of reading, writing, and a bit of maths, and then nothing else. Everything else is up for grabs. And he said to me, that shows a naivety about the strength of the subject lobbies. And I said to him, well, that's your problem. If you are beholden to humanities lobby groups or science lobby groups or modern language lobby groups, or performing creative arts, if that's your way of coming up with a curriculum that you've got to try and please all these people, you're never going to please anyone. They need to go. UAE just said, right, we are scrapping our curriculum, we are starting again in in reception, and theirs is such a modern curriculum. It's all about AI skills, that critical appreciation about what's fake, what's not fake, and all of that stuff. And our government is just like, well, they've put a little bit into, and they want it crammed into PSHE. Come on.
Feels like the last big curriculum change was it 2011, 2012, around that time. And I can remember, and I was new to teaching then. I'd been in schools for a long time, but new to teaching, the teaching standards and the curriculum. What it felt like to me then was, I'm primary trained. What it felt like to me was a big squish of information into. I was key stage 1 and mainly, but key stage 2 a bit later on. Key stage 1 is just squished full of stuff that you don't have time to teach, and it's so foundational, that age, that it felt like a missed opportunity. It still does now, and I know there's huge issues with like squeezing everything in. Like, for example, let's say a child doesn't get division at the most basic level in year 1, they won't touch division again properly until another year. And so you go, we didn't do it. We did it in week 1 in November. They won't touch that again until again in November in year 2. And to me, it's like, why do we have it all squished into this like what fits really neatly into those little boxes in the national curriculum, but the reality of boots on the floor delivering it and how it's received by not all, some children cope really well, and I think this is maybe 50% of a class will cope really well with that speed and moving on, but the other 50% and particularly 20% of the class are going to really struggle with that. And then it's like that breadth and depth, so we can go, I have a real bee in my bonnet about this. I could do an hour on my own, I think. I'm saying, like, let's go bigger and deeper into this for those people that are ready. But for those people who are not, there's no time to go, we really need to slow this right down. Let's really understand how numbers work and work together and find patterns. Let's do this when they're 5 and 6, so they really get it. But instead, we start learning about fractions that don't relate to the times tables that they're being taught anyway. And it's all very mixed and matched. And if we don't deal with like some of the fundamental stuff early on, that's what we're coping with in year 5 and 6. We're now all the interventions groups. So what happens is that this is why I feel like this is why it's relevant. You're talking about the humanities or the arts and the music. Those children don't go to art and music. Those children aren't learning about geography or the local area, because what they're doing is they're being put out in the corridor doing phonics in year 6, doing the catch-up stuff.
So one of my sons is teaching in a London academy trust, and he said to me, "Can I just ask you about your approach to the GCSEs?" I went, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "We are doing no teaching from January. All they do is they do a mock, we mark it, they go over it, mock, mark, go review." And he said it's putting huge pressure on teachers. The amount of marking I've got to do is kids hate it. They're so bored out of their brains. And that's because this particular trust prides itself on their GCSE results. And you just think, really? Should you be spending 5 months just doing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, just utterly, and then we wonder why kids don't want to attend school.
It's madness, isn't it? It is madness.
It's crazy.
We're coming up to the hour. We've got a few traditions here on Three Bosses in the podcast. You have been an incredible guest. There's so many insights, and I'm sure we'll get you back on.
100%.
Our last guest was the wonderful Sarah Marsh. And she gave us a little quote of what she would say to her younger self. And she said, "Back yourself. Enjoy life, because this is not a rehearsal." How would you respond to that? What does that resonate in you? What does that chime in you, Alex?
Well, this is not a rehearsal, I think is really interesting, because I always ask people, why don't you do something now? Why are you waiting? Oh, it's because I'm not sure. I want to check this. I want to do that. And it's like, come on, you haven't got time. Do it. Be decisive. Back yourself. Go for it. Because, I have made some hideous mistakes in my working life, and I'm really glad I made those mistakes, because I learned so much from them. Yeah. Actually, I also, the other thing I always say to people coming through, when you sit in the staff room and you bitch and moan about the head, SLT, they're rubbish. I always say to them, right, one day that will be you. So you just need to remember why you thought it was so bad and make sure you don't do that. So you're learning all the time. But yeah, it's not a rehearsal. You have to take the plunge. You have to go for it. And I think as for backing yourself, I think that's really tough. When you're young, growing up, backing yourself, it's really hard. But she's right. You do need to, but there's that fine line, isn't there, between confidence and arrogance, and getting that right is tricky.
I also think backing yourself is something that you are able to do with experience. And what I mean by that is that when you make a decision in your late teens or your early 20s, or even your mid 20s and late 20s, you're like, was that a good decision? I don't know. You've got no framework, you've got no benchmark to assess whether that decision was worth backing yourself on, for example. And sometimes, it's really useful to have the humility and going, ooh, I've done a humdinger there. That's not good. So what would you say to your younger self?
It goes back to what I was talking to you earlier. I didn't realize that everybody had something to offer, and it's your job as a leader to find out what it is. And so I go back to the comment that my dad said to me as a rather arrogant 18-year-old, which was respect and make sure that everybody, you know what makes people tick and that everybody's got something to offer. And it's really easy to say that. It's flipping hard to do. And it's really hard to. And I also think the other thing I would say is don't be presumptuous about who people are and what their values are. Because I've made judgments on people and I've been proved wrong, and they've actually got really good intention, and I've made an assumption because of, I don't know, the way they dress, the way they speak, the way they act, I don't know. So I think it is about the advice I would give my younger self is embrace everything, take every opportunity as a learning opportunity, and store it all away so that you can then feed off that as you go through your career and your life.
Beautiful.
I love it. I like the bit everything is a learning opportunity, because it's true. Actually, the number of mistakes we've all made in our respective businesses and whatever is that you go, well, not going to do that again, or you've gone, oh, that was actually a brilliant idea, and I don't know why we've not done. And once you come out the other side, well, it's absolutely as clear as day that that's what I should have done, but it just happened. You started doing it because it was the beginnings of a mistake, but it turned out brilliantly. Everything is a learning curve. Everything's for learning. One of the other traditions that we have, Alex, is where our guests said, I'm terrified of this, because this is, I suppose, where you get your revenge back on me as a young, keen employee many years ago, where I had far fewer wrinkles. But you get to set Richard and I a challenge, and then we go and do that challenge within the week. We record ourselves do it, and it's also part of the podcast series. So we are all ears. What is your challenge to the Three Bosses in a Podcast team?
Okay. So my challenge to you is this. There will be stuff that you do in your daily routines or your daily work that you like doing. My challenge is, do you need to do it? And ask yourself why you do it. So if I can just give you a little bit of context, this head teacher that I'm mentoring, I said to him, do you think you're an effective head? And he said, yes, I do. And I said, tell me about your working week. And da 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 da. And he said, and I teach there, and I teach there. I said, why do you teach? He said, I love teaching. I said, do you need to teach to be an effective head? Oh, yes, no, I really do. And I said, but hold on, your responsibilities as a head is to run your school is a £10 million business. You're a business person. You're not a teacher. You have other people to teach. He said, but I love it. It makes me feel secure. I said to him, stop doing it. You'll be a better leader. He's still teaching.
Just can't give it up.
Just, he can't give it up. Because we all have it's like comfort food, isn't it? And I think to be the very best leader, you have to serve the needs of the organization, not serve yourself and your own preferences and interests.
This is really challenging. Have you got something that's coming straight to mind, Richard?
Well, no, do you know what I've written down is that, like, what do I do that just keeps me in my comfort zone? That's stopping me from doing the things that I need to be doing, which is uncomfortable. That uncomfortable growth. I mean, I did allude to it earlier on, and I don't think this is a day-to-day thing, but that idea of having a difficult conversation, I do find that really hard. But there might be steps towards that I need to do with make myself uncomfortable a different way in the business. So yeah, I resonate with that. I don't know what that is yet. I actually still teach a lot in my tuition business, so that could be it.
Why'd you do that? Why'd you teach?
So I do. Ready for the excuses, Alex?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. So I predominantly is face to face, and I've found it difficult to recruit in the face to face center. And when I found over the few years that I've run the center here, I found three teachers who I've really loved, and they just work lovely with the children the way that similar in the way I would do it. They've gone off to have very selfishly to start their families and have children.
Outrageous,
Isn't it? And I love them all, and they're amazing. I'm always like sort of waiting for 4 or 5 years until they can come back again. I wouldn't say I'm doing nothing about that, but in the face-to-face perspective, I found that really difficult.
Yeah, but what you're actually saying is that it's the cult of the indispensable, and you've got to break that cult.
Yes.
I say, Penny Alford, Matt, cult of the indispensable, and I keep saying to her, if you're going to be a CEO, you have to break that.
I think this should be the title of this episode.
The cult of the indispensable.
Okay, write that down, man.
And I think for my part, it's really interesting. It's interesting that we're having this conversation now, because it's been thrown into sharp relief this week alone. I love, and I'm good at it, I love doing education consultations. And what I mean by that is that families ring up, they're like, my son's struggling with maths or science or history or whatever it might be. And then we start an education consultation, and I love it. We start learning about the family and where they live and the
That's not your job.
problems.
That's not your job.
Yeah, and I love that. But I've got a team of client managers. That's not my job.
Yeah, don't do it.
Not my job. And it's my general manager, who's flipping amazing. I was like, I'm really sorry. I got muddled up with the system. We've got a new system for our group tuition classes. Well, it's not a new system. It's just I'm rubbish at using it. And they're like, and she said to me very kindly and very sweetly, she was like, "It's not your job." I'm kind of offended. I'm like, it's my company.
Yeah, don't do it. Concentrate on growing the business. That's your job.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. We shall talk more on this at a later date. But Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I'm sure there's plenty more that people would love to ask you about. But if people were to try to get into contact with you or find out a little bit more about you, how would they get to do that?
If you go to Bourne Education Trust on the website, my email's on the website.
Fantastic.
We'll make sure the links are everywhere, yeah.
And the other thing that we'll need to say as well is that, because we haven't mentioned, but let's crowbar it in, you also run a charity, don't you? And it's called AI in Education.
Yeah, so that was another of these opportunities where a bloke said to me, should we work together? And I said, yeah, let's do something in the AI space. And we looked at each other and said, should we set up a charity and try and serve the sector? And we did. And it's great. And I really enjoy it. It's good.
And we'll have to get you back on to talk way more about that, because I think it's a really curious space. I think it evokes a lot of emotion, fear, excitement, and everything in between. But Alex, thank you so very much. And we'll see you all in the next episode.
It was really nice meeting you. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Cheers. Bye.